Ladies and gentlemen, our guest today lost everything and then went to the extreme to help other people lose everything, or at least a lot of their bodies. And yes, he lives in a valley, but he's also been through some valleys that he's now using to help others get out of their valleys. He's made a bunch of money, but more importantly, this dad made cash and ruby. His goal to help 1 million people move is always on his side. No, really, it's tattooed on his side. And I promise if you listen to his podcast, you'll breathe a sigh of relief and say, I needed that. He's made you laugh, cry, and get inspired. He's a great dad, a podcast host, an entrepreneur, a real life transformer, a hurdler, and a familiar face. He is this week's guest on the Goaro podcast, Mr. Chris Powell. Chris, my brother, welcome.
That was a really good intro. Did you write that? You're so
I wrote that.
good,
I did.
man. That was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. And let's fact check it all. How did the fact? Because some of those, many people know. Yeah, you made cash. You've made a lot of money, but you've made cash and ruby, referring, of course, to your two children.
The most valuable things in my life. That's for sure. So
that's it. And did you pick the hurdler? I didn't know. By the way, we are hurdlers at RO. We play hurdle every single day. Just like you all play hurdle on I Needed That. So you're not literally, you probably could hurdles, but you're a hurdler on the online game.
What a great game, by the way. Also, you know, it's so funny. In full transparency, I didn't even know about hurdle before Matthew, my podcast co-host, was like, nice. Get out of here. You don't know what hurdle is. Hold on. We're going to play it right now. We played it and we had so much fun with it. We're like, we have to do this every single time on the podcast.
It's so much. We go to, so our producer, Caitlin, who's listening now, is the queen of hurdle. I mean, it's like yesterday it was something like Cage the Elephant, Cigarette Daydream, like a random one. And she was in half a second. She nailed it. And then she'll go down to 2000. I don't know if you go all the way down to the 60s. Oh, so wow. We play like 9 versions of
Oh my God. So you know, the furthest back we've gone is the 80s. That's my era, but nice. 60s, you guys are hardcore then.
No one gets them, the 60s, but we at least try.
Exactly.
You know?
Yes.
Bro, I'm so glad to talk to you. Thank you for coming on. Everybody knows you, which will lead to a question further in the show, talking about some of the valleys you've gone through. But man, will you start for us? 28 years old, living out of your car, losing everything. Will you talk about what brought you to there? And then obviously there's an amazing story afterwards, but tell us about that, just going all the way back. The people may not know that piece of your story.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I ended up, graduated degree in exercise science, passionate about helping people change. I always have been, because exercise helped change my life. And at the time I actually landed a gig on the local morning news show, which is Good Morning Arizona. And through that experience, I was actually, I met a gentleman who was 630 pounds. We became best friends. I helped him lose 400 pounds. It was just a wild journey. And I'm getting to how I ended up living out of my car. Yeah. In the process though, I was in the gym, just doing what I do in the gym, getting a little crazy. And I ended up herniating a disc in my back. And then at the time, so this is back in 2006. And, I had a lot going for me at the time, as far as like, I had a local segment on TV. I was a up and coming trainer in the area, and, with a full waiting list, heck of a roster. I had actually also at the same time, I had invented a nutrition system. And I took I had actually saved up over $100,000. I borrowed some money as well. And I tooled a factory in China, and I started creating these nutrition systems that I was really passionate about, teaching people how to change the way they eat by colors and numbers. And so I was just super passionate about that, injured my back. When I was, I go to the doctor, and again, back in 2006, the first thing a lot of the doctors would say was, well, take this for pain. Handed me not just like one of those little orange bottles of Vicodin, but it was one of those, this sucker was like probably a foot long. And it didn't have 30 pills in it. It had 300. And, it was great for managing the pain. At the same time, like within the same window of time, my first shipment of all this product, like this is my dream, was to create this nutrition system and everything. And I had it shipped over from China. It landed at the port at San Pedro. I go out there. I open up this container, and it's full of 12,000 units of this product that I had literally spent and borrowed hundreds of thousands of dollars to make. And I opened up the first box and the thing fell apart in my hands. And I literally
Uh,
collapsed onto the ground. I put my forehead on the pavement. I remember it being really hot, but I just sat there. I and my whole, like, all of the hope and all these dreams literally just
mm,
collapsed right there, because the thing is, there wasn't any recourse based on the channels that I went through. I didn't know what I was doing. There was no contract or anything. So I realized that I just in that moment lost a couple $100,000. And by the way, not all of it was mine. And
right.
so, sure enough, going back to the painkillers, I quickly realized within a couple days, not only did they kill the physical pain, but they also killed the emotional pain and the disappointment of everything I was going through. And 2 a day quickly turned into 12 a day. And then that turned into just
Wow.
a 2 year battle. I ended up losing everything. And I ended up, my roommate at the time was a great guy, just probably one of the nicest people in the world. He was severely hooked on painkillers as well. It was a common bond that we had. And he ended up kind of going upside down one day. Well, he got, there's a drug called Suboxone, and it blocks the receptors. So if you do take opiates after that, because we're both for 2 years saying we got to stop, we got to stop. As it got worse and
Yeah.
worse and worse, we would always have these conversations. We have to stop, but we just couldn't. And no matter how many times we tried, so he got Suboxone, and his body, his guts released everything. He started bleeding out. It was a horrendous situation. I'm
Oh,
2 years deep into a heavy painkiller addiction now. I went from Vicodin to Percocet to OxyContin, morphine, whatever, name it, whatever we could get our hands on. And I remember sitting there when I took him to the hospital. That was kind of like the moment of clarity for me. I was like, I can't keep living like this. I'm gonna die. I'm gonna end up in the hospital like him. And so that was a long journey of recovery for him. My neighbor at the time, he knew what we were going through. We're two, I mean, I don't mean to, like, but like, we're just good guys, but we were severely hooked on drugs, and we just couldn't get
yes.
out of its claws. And my neighbor was a great man, and he saw what we were going through. He said, "Hey, when I took my roommate to the hospital, he owned the condo. He was losing it because he was upside down on that as well. He's like, you got to move out." So I threw my duffel bag in my car, and my neighbor said, "Hey, why don't you crash on my couch for a couple weeks and you grind this out?" So I went cold turkey on that one. And my
Wow.
neighbor, what a great man. He was an angel, and he came into my life at the right time, and he let me just recover in his guest room and on his couch. And then one day, when I was feeling better, I was starting to come back around. I said, "Dude, thanks so much." I got in my car and I drove. I called a couple of friends. "Hey, can I crash on your couch tonight?" And that was my life for the next several months, is just kind of floating from couch to couch, figuring out what I was going to do. And so this is 2008 at this moment. Um, I went out to LA thinking that, well, it was where I was that was the problem, not who I was. Right. That,
Yeah.
of course,
Yeah.
there's definitely some misguided thinking. I was like, oh, well, if I go to LA, that will solve all of my problems. So I run away from
Right.
Arizona, away from the people I owed money to. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Conveniently. Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
spent a few weeks out there just going around looking for jobs, seeing what I could do, going to local gyms, and just seeing if I could drum up any kind of business. And it didn't solve my problems though. And I woke up one day on my friend's couch out in Woodland Hills, and there's a chihuahua like licking my face. She had these three chihuahuas, and it was like, and I literally sat up and I was like, what am I doing? It's not where I am, it's who I am. And I was so busy as I was going through this journey, even though I was sober at this time. I mean, three
Right.
months sober. I was still so pissed. I was so busy
Mm.
pointing the finger at all the reasons why it happened to me, and it was this person's fault and that person's fault, and it was this person, and I was just angry until I literally woke up that morning, and I realized, I was like, it's like that Taylor Swift song. I'm like, I'm the problem. It's me, you know.
Right.
And
Yes.
I just
Right.
went, there's only one person in this world who's going to get myself out of this. And I'm not going to get, like, no one's going to come save me. Opportunities will present themselves, which is great, but I got to save myself here. Like I got to,
Yeah.
I have to take ownership and full responsibility. So I did. And I packed up my bag. I said, I'm going back to Arizona. I'm going to face my problems head on and dig myself out of this thing. I stopped at a tattoo parlor on Ventura Boulevard, driving out of town, and I had tattooed the Roman numerals. You mentioned this in the intro, 1 through a million down my
Yeah.
side. And I told the tattoo artist, I was like, look, I have no home. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but somehow by the time I leave this world, I want to make a positive difference in a million lives. And this is the purpose that I have to live for, because I need it. I need a purpose. I need meaning. Otherwise, I know I can fall back into the grip of my vices. And so I couldn't escape it. I tattooed it on my body, so I couldn't, that was the promise that was going to keep me on the straight and narrow and gave me a purpose in life. And I drove back to Arizona. And my buddy, who I ended up helping lose 400 pounds, his family actually opened up their doors to me, and they let me sleep on their couch until I got back on my feet. It took me about 4 more months. And I ended up getting a job and started making some money. When I started making some money, I could rent a house. And my buddy, who I helped lose 400 pounds, he went from 630, he's now 229 pounds, moved in with me. We're like besties. We lived together for 2 years. And what happened is that he decided to share his before and after pictures on MySpace. Remember MySpace back in the day?
Wow. Oh
And it
yeah,
went
sure.
viral. Sure enough, a couple websites saw it, and it was 500,000 views overnight on this one website. And then before you know it, the
Wow.
phone started ringing off the hook. I'm getting emails. I don't know how they found me, but 2020, Oprah, The View. I mean, it was just, they all started reaching out because of this incredible transformation that my friend had been through. And they wanted to know,
Wow.
like, okay, wait, you're his trainer. You guys are best friends. You're living together. Like, this is a story. So before you
Yeah.
know it, we were all over the place. We did Oprah in 2020 and The View, and we were all, and yeah. So that's, and from there, it was actually when we were on the Today Show. There was a friend of mine, actually, she's in Los Angeles. She's a casting director. She's like, hey, I just saw you on the Today Show. This is so cool. We're looking for someone to help us in the consultation of the development of another weight loss show. Would you be interested in talking to my CEO? I said, yeah. So I ended up chatting with the CEO of a production company in Los Angeles, and we created the concept of the show. I drove out there a couple times. We mapped the whole thing out on a whiteboard, and we developed what became Extreme Makeover Weight Loss Edition. Yeah, it was a
Wow.
wild story.
I, I did not know that story. There's so much in there. One of them, the thing that just, do you ever see the like where people rescue dogs and they say like who saved who, like just how important. I think about your friend, and just like you thought maybe by all appearances you saved him, and then all of a sudden he comes in and saves you. I mean, think without that, just the trajectory, but it came from you before, and it seemingly saving him before he came back and saved you. Do you keep in touch
Oh
with
yeah, I
him?
just talked to him 3 weeks ago. Yeah, no,
No way.
he's doing okay. He went through some really tough times, and he ended up gaining
Yeah.
a lot of the weight back, losing it,
Mhm.
gaining it back again, and losing it again. And so he's
Wow.
back down into he's like 330 now, but he got back up to into the 700s. And so we're talking weight gain and
Is
loss
he
on a
really?
massive scale. And he,
Yeah.
we've been through so many things. I mean, so many crazy adventures in our lives, and it's like, all the craziness. And so he'll always be one of my best friends of all time. And but the thing is,
Yeah.
when you do that so many times, and he's in his mid 40s now, and so his body can only handle so much. And so he went through some tough times,
Yeah.
and he ended up in the hospital for quite some time because he put a lot of stress on his body. But who he is as a person, he is a beautiful human, and just, I mean, one of my best friends. We can sit there and we can laugh and laugh and laugh, and he's a good dude, and he saved me. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people
Wow.
saw what I did for him. And there is
Yeah.
TLC did two documentaries about his weight loss and everything, and it was great. But a lot of people don't realize that he's the one that saved me. in a lot of different
Wow.
ways. He's the one that opened up
Yeah.
my eyes to the beauty of transformation and to helping people
Mm.
change and the emotional side of change and not just the physical side.
Yeah.
And then he turned around and his family opened up their doors to me and let me sleep on their couch while I got back on my feet. And so, we're in each other's lives for a lot of reasons. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're bound together. Um, the thing that was so interesting to me, and you mentioned it there, your tattoo. I saw I've seen your tattoo. People are familiar with your tattoo. I just assumed it was after you formed Move 1 Million. And I just assumed it was after extreme weight loss. What's so amazing to me about that, and there's so much here for all of us, just as a metaphor, is before any of it happened, it was only faith. It was not sight. Like you put that on as your North Star. That was a really striking piece of your story to me, that it was all just in faith. And I mean, look at it. Like you have helped over 1 million people now. I think that was an amazing thing. And again, I don't know, and you touched on it, but why in the heck would you think you would be able to, at the point where why on earth did you have the audacity or to believe that you could actually do that at that moment?
That's a really good question.
Or did you just need to hear yourself say
You
it?
know what? That was it. I think I needed just, I didn't know what was possible and it just felt right, I guess. Like, and I've never been asked that
Mm,
before. As far as like, why that number? I don't know, to be honest
yeah.
with you. And it felt right. And I just thought, okay, if, I give it my all, what kind of impact could I make? And
Yeah.
that's what it was. And it was just like, you know what,
Mm,
if somehow positively impact 1 million lives, I feel like I could leave the world a better place. I think it, like, that
yeah.
felt meaningful to me and it felt right, and so I did it. And but it is mind-blowing, Joey, like, just to think about the impact that's been made since. I still don't feel like I deserve it. It's just like, and
Yeah.
it's the
Yeah.
craziest. It's so crazy to think of the fact that I was able to touch a lot of lives and it feels really good. But then at the same time, the name Move 1 Million, it came about because I, for quite some time, when I went through my struggles with mental health, I
Yeah.
lost that, and I lost myself, and I lost my vision. And so Move 1 Million was me coming back to my roots. And so that's where the name
Yeah.
came from, actually, because I needed to find that purpose again. And it worked, bro. It I found my
Yeah.
happiness in some of my darkest times when I was like going through anxiety and depression, where a lot of people want to focus on themselves. I found it when I served other people. And that's what it brought me
Yeah.
back. So like, this has saved me twice now. It's crazy. I know. And I
It,
can't
it,
explain it, and I still have a difficult time comprehending it, but it's worked. And so like, I just can't leave it,
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, it makes me think, in the Bible, they talk about, like, in the Israelites, they would build, something would happen, God would do something, and they would build a monument. And that monument is to memorialize. But then it's also like, as they're wandering the wilderness, they go back to that monument and be like, oh yeah, that's right. Like, this happened before. This helped us. This developed our faith before. And I think about the fact that you put it on your body and you couldn't escape it. It was always there. And so then when the difficulty came, you just went back to your anchor. Like, this is my anchor. This is the thing that's guiding me. What a powerful thing for all of it. And do you continue, not that you're getting tattoos all the time, but do you still do things like that, almost symbolically, then when something moves, just as like, okay, I need to come back to this monument again, whether it's a journaling or something
Yes,
like that?
yes. Well, actually, I got this tattoo on my wrist here, and it's this. And actually, my buddy David, who I helped lose the 400 pounds, he's got the matching
Nice.
tattoo here on his left wrist,
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
it's 3 dots, and this is my compass, and it's because I struggle with anxiety. I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, so I
Yeah.
have a tendency to I ruminate and I project into the future, and so I spend a lot of time there. And so it's these 3 dots, and they
Yeah.
just represent the past, the present, the future. And when I see it, it reminds me and I'll literally shift back onto my heels as catching myself in a mental trigger. And I'll shift back onto my
Yep.
heels, take a deep breath, and I'll bring myself back into the moment, because I tend to fall into the future so much. And then David would fall into the
Yeah.
past. And so he would suffer from depression because he'd go back into his past and regret and all these different things.
Oh,
So again, it helps pull him. So like this is like all these little things. Like I've got my tattoos
I
are
love it.
guides through life, if you will. It's like I have my
Yeah.
purpose here, and then I got my compass here,
Yeah.
and then you can't see it. I actually have one. It's tattooed. It's very clear right now, but if I go out in the light, it's yellow, and it's a sun, and it just reminds me to shine. Like where I go, just let the light
Mm,
shine through us. So
wow.
that's yeah, that's all I got. Well then, well I had this
That-
one. It's going away. That's
yeah, that's
another
right.
story
On the
unto
ring finger.
itself.
Yeah. That's right. We'll leave that
Yeah,
out. People can look at. People can
I'm
go
working
read the
on removing
tabloids
this
on
one,
that.
and yeah, we'll leave that one alone.
Absolutely. Leave the ring finger tattoo
Yeah.
alone. I want to talk about. I have a question. Everybody knows extreme weight loss, and bro, it's. I mean, I'm a crier to begin with, but I just watched a couple of clips again. Just remind, we used to watch this, obviously the show all the time, like everybody did, and which, by the way, is now on Hulu. The Hulu picked it up just as a reminder to everybody. Extreme weight loss. It's so good. I just sat there and cried, Chris. I mean, just watching those stories of people, and the question I have associated with that is, first, are you an empath? Are you empathetic in by
Yes.
nature?
Yes, I am.
So in doing that show, I want to try to ask this question the right way. Obviously, you're celebrating with them. You feel that with them, but could you also get pulled into the darkness with them and just feel like that darkness? That seems like that would be a really hard thing to fight off. I'm an empath as well. Was that hard to not get pulled into the depths along with them?
Yes. Um, and if for those of you who have seen the show, you'll see, like you, Joey, I'm a crier, and I cry.
Yeah.
I I hosted the show, and I cried more than anyone on my own show,
Right.
and that's okay. I'm okay. I'm proud of that. Um, but
Yes.
like because what you see, we legitimately spend a year with that individual, and so we built. There's a relationship that's built, and I always had to remind myself as I was going through it. I said, my purpose here is to help this individual through a transformation. Let them shoot a TV show around it. So I let the producers do their job, and they shot a TV show around it.
Yeah.
um for me, it was about connecting with the individual, like with the person I was going through this journey with, and helping them through. And there were, it's interesting because in the typical trainer client world, there are certain lines that we have, but the thing is, like, I became a part of their families. They became a part of
Yeah.
ours. I mean, when Ruby was born, my daughter, who's 9 now, but there were 8 individuals from season 4 that were in the room.
Wow.
And I mean, like they were there for the birth of my daughter. I mean, like these people, they're family.
Wow.
And so it
Mm.
was yeah, no, it was actually no, they were yeah, season 4. Oh my gosh, that's so crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was it we we bond on so many ways, and
Yeah.
a lot of the magic happens off camera. That's how we really get to know each other. And so yes, to go
Oh,
back to your question, it's amazing, like, with all the celebrations of all the happiness, but like people also they're carrying a lot of heavy stuff with them.
yeah.
And so it was emotionally exhausting because a lot of times you, as much as I was aware of it, and we actually had psychologists on the show and everything to help people through some really this stuff as they start to unpack it and things start to come up,
Yeah.
that we had that for help. But at the same time, you can't help but get pulled into some of it. And
Yeah.
it was the 5 years that I did it. They were the greatest years of my life. But they were definitely emotionally exhausting and heavy. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that couldn't have been a light time. I mean, it just could have had to be. I mean, I even think I grew up and I was overweight when I was young, and so I still have little triggers at 43 years old where I can hear someone calling me names and all that stuff, and I can't imagine someone who's growing up with really extreme weight issues because of all the baggage that comes with it and all of the childhood trauma that comes
Mm.
with it, and then trying to rewire relationships with people around you and with food and it's just it had to be so heavy for you to battle through
Well,
it
you
and to be
you
along with
just said
them.
it. The part that really pulled at me the most was the childhood trauma, which was that is the
Mm,
common denominator. I mean, we've done 76 transformations, and everyone had experienced, and every human experiences childhood trauma of some sort, and the degree
Yeah.
to what that is, it is relative to the individual, but like just to be there. And some of the things that some of these individuals had endured as children is heartbreaking, especially when you have children of your own and you put yourself
Yeah.
there, and it's hard not, it's to be there with them, because the thing is, it's like to work them through that is out of my scope of practice. We had therapists there, but
Yeah.
I could be there as a friend and a supporter, and I was. And so as they're unpacking it and my arm is around them and I'm, holding them and hugging them, it's just like, boy, you learn a lot about trauma and about its effects and
Yeah.
how it reprograms the brain, but also how people can start to unpack that and release it. And it actually gives you hope that it gives you hope for everyone that you can heal from this and you can recover even some of the really traumatic stuff that people have been through. But boy,
Yeah.
you're right. It can be heavy. And I brought it
Mm.
home with me a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Which led to you talked about, and I'm curious, you started to lose hope, and this may have been a couple years after the show. It may have overlapped with the show when you just began to lose hope, and you've been courageously very open about this part of your story. Will you talk us
Sure.
through that? What it was like 7 years ago when the hopelessness
Yeah.
started to hit and the depression started to set in?
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a lot that had happened because, my then wife and myself, she became a
Hmm.
co-host with me, and
Right.
it was, it. Hey, I'm just going to shoot you straight, man. That got really
Yeah.
difficult because, um, it- I I felt, it's not that I felt, we had two different missions. And so I started this whole thing with one specific mission, but then she's her own individual, she's her own person. And
Sure.
it felt like
Yeah.
all of a sudden the direction we were going was divided. And so,
Mm.
and at the same time, but we were on this trajectory, and she wanted to do her thing. And I wanted to take everything in my direction as well. And so we, they really started to create a rift between us there. And then, but then on top of that, we were on this massive platform. And so we're
Yeah.
not just television, but now social media and all these different things. And then you get all that feedback from other people in social media. And so it's like she continued to want to run her direction. I continued to want to run mine. And it actually turned into, in our marriage, and this is where things really started to fall apart, but there was disrespect. And so
Mm.
and we started to lose respect for each other in the directions
Yeah.
that we were going, and it started to build. And then at the same time, because what had happened is that a brand had been built together, and so it really created so much confusion and chaos. And it was like trying to, like, how do we deal with this? And she's going her direction in life, and that's not my direction. It doesn't feel right to me. Like, I have to go this direction, and this is the direction I
Yeah.
always had been on in my path. And I was thinking, am I being selfish here? Like, what's happening? And it started to create resentment. And then there's the fear of, wait a second. And that resentment, it actually started, all of that, the lack of respect, the resentment, and everything, it started to bring out a side of me I didn't even know existed. And it was not
Huh.
kind. And it was, and then we have
Interesting.
4 kids, and they started to see that. And it got uglier and uglier. And then we started, of course, we started seeing therapists. I saw 6 therapists in 5 years, between, marriage counselors, individual therapists. I mean, I did a number of different therapies, just trying to kind of figure out how we could make something work between us. And but even though it might work for a week or two, we both fell right back into the directions we were going, and it continued to get worse. And so I made the decision. It was me that said, I can't do this anymore. The kids are seeing the worst side of both of us. And
Yeah.
so, but in that process of, and hanging in there and trying to fix things for years, it got to a point where it was anger and frustration and anger, resentment, all these different things. And then it was so weird, Joey, though, but like, it reached a tipping point where I actually went like it turned into apathy. And that's
Mm.
when everything went hollow and empty. And a lot of people are like, well, what happened to the anger? And this is why I try to explain it. I couldn't feel anymore, and I withdrew. And that's when things got really bad, is when it just turned into this
Mm.
chaos, confusion, withdrawal. It felt like everything, just this whole kingdom that we had been building, just collapsed. And I lost hope. And that's when I knew I had a really big
Wow.
problem. Talking to one of my therapists, I remember, I got up to go to the bathroom and I looked down at her clipboard, and she had written depression and then anxiety disorder. And then she circled anxiety disorder. I came back from the bathroom. I sat down. She said, I've been seeing you for well over a year now. Would you be interested in talking to a psychiatrist? I think it's time.
Mm.
And I just told her, I said, I'll do anything to feel normal again. I don't know what's happened to me. I don't feel like I've lost myself. I lost, dude, like
Wow.
I wasn't even expressive like this anymore. I couldn't feel.
Yeah.
And yeah, and everything was just to the point where, but I just didn't want to be around anyone or see anyone. I mean, I was great with my kids, but that was it. That's all I wanted to do, was just be with my kids. And yeah, and so that's when I was at a point where I was just desperate for change. So that's when I started employing all these different therapies: breathing, walking,
Yeah.
meditation, all this. And then I went and I saw a psychiatrist, and so we started a pharmaceutical intervention. And for a period of my life, like I actually started to feel like myself again, and it was a wonderful first step in getting myself out of the
Yeah.
hole. And then now I don't need the pharmaceuticals anymore, but I still continue on with the rest of these other tactics that have completely changed my life. So,
Wow.
but it was a really bad place, man. I was in a dark place for almost 5 years. It just got worse and worse.
What it, what is it like to tell that story now? You're using it as for help for others. And one interesting thing about it, and I've actually said this on the show before, when I've gone to therapy before, when I would struggle with something, and then my therapist would say, "Here's what that is." They should give a name to it, and something about that gave me comfort. And I've heard you tell the story on when you saw the anxiety disorder circled, and that seemed like a turning point. And I don't know if I'm extrapolating too much, but it feels like it was because you had a name to it, it was so tangible and concrete that you were then able to do something with it. Is that too much of an
No,
extrapolation, or is that
you
right?
nailed it. That was actually a turning point. And I tell the story because it was so impactful in my life. That's a moment
Yeah.
that's forever ingrained. I can't unlive that moment. And I'll have that memory forever, because that was the turning point when it went, oh, it's so funny, Joy, because like when you're in it, sometimes you can't see it. And even though I
Yeah.
was struggling to feel until it was named, I was confused until it was named. And then
Mm.
once that happened, I went, oh, okay. And then it was like, because this is something that I hear a lot about. And boy, a lot of people are struggling with this. First of all, I didn't feel alone. And second of all, I knew that there are numerous paths to help
Yeah.
that condition. And that's what helped me.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, because like, I think, or at least I thought, I had an incredible sense of body awareness. But if you
Yeah.
don't know, you don't know what you don't know. And so I was experiencing something. I didn't know the name of it, and I was so lost until it was named. That was a turning point in my life, for
Wow.
sure.
Dude, that's so good. But I'm curious on when you started seeing the bad version, the part of yourself you didn't know existed. I've heard when people describe post traumatic stress disorder, people especially who have been in war, and the thing that really causes the trauma is reliving things that they didn't know they were capable of, knowing that they have done something in battle or something they didn't know. Did that send you down a spiral, seeing that side of yourself? Because you are kind and you are genuine, and it's not just an on-screen persona. Was it seeing that version? Did that really like kind of expedite the shame spiral or the spiral you're in?
100%. I I can't tell you, and I am embarrassed to say this. I can't tell you how many times I said, some horrible, hurtful things in front of my kids. My kids
Yeah.
saw me be terrible to their mom. And I'm really, really embarrassed to say that. But that's when I realized, like, okay, you know, and she was a lot better. Like, typically if she was to lash out to me, it it was not in front of the kids, you know, but and then it would build
Yeah.
up and then it would come out. And I was so ashamed of that. Um, that's when I realized it was just the toxicity of the relationship. It was bringing out the worst of me, and it was me. I'm the one that was getting worse. And that's when
Yeah.
I just thought, okay, for her sake, for my kids' sake, for everyone's sake, I got to remove myself from the situation so I can at least show up as the best me that I need to heal, so I can show up as the best me for her and for them. And I need to remove myself
Yeah.
from the situation because I mean, after 5 years, it was only getting worse. And we threw a lot at therapy and at, you know, I believe we fought for this, you know, and I feel like I fought to try to figure it out, but I also just realized that at the end of the day, I really needed to step away to fix myself,
Mm.
which, you know, and I know with that comes the whole stigma about, like, well, family, you know, the family got taken apart to a certain extent. Um, I am happy to say, though, on the flip side, that my relationship with my kids is better than ever, and I'm closer. I'm
Good.
closer now with them than I've ever been. Um, I can actually have a friendship with Heidi, which is good, um, and
Yeah.
it's a healthy one with distance, and I
Yeah.
respect her. I wish the very best for her, but, like, man, I'm showing up for my kids, and they're seeing a happy
Yeah,
me
bro.
and a healthy me, and which is good. But I mean, at the end of the day, like,
Mm.
who's to say with if what I did was right or wrong? But it was, I believe the overall net result has been positive for
Yeah.
my family. Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, it's your story. That's the thing. Like it is your story. And they tell you, you read so much about just like embracing and owning your story. And I feel, bro, I feel you, and I could see, I felt it because I saw you feeling it, and I felt it in my own life. The things when I look back, I'm like, I can't believe I said that to my kids. I can't believe I popped off like that. How do you, how does somebody, um, deal with that? How do you, maybe this, I'm asking you for advice. How do I deal with the moments when I've in the past that I can't change?
Right.
Literally, I can't change, and I do live, probably live. I'm like your friend. I probably live in the past a little bit more than I need to. Um, how do you deal with that? How do you reconcile that? How do you move on from those things without just constantly apologizing to everybody around you, which they get tired of hearing that. It doesn't do any good
They
anyway.
can. But you actually just said, for me, what's something that's really helped, and that was the magic words. I actually went to Maddox, my oldest, and Marley. So they were my
Mm-hmm.
stepchildren. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
I actually got down on my knees and I asked them for their
Wow.
forgiveness. And I apologized to
Mm.
them for being such an asshole when, you know,
Yeah.
in the final years of, you know, the marriage with their mom and everything. And I asked them for their forgiveness, and they were wonderful about it. And actually, Heidi even commented afterwards. She said, "Thank you so much for doing that. You had no idea. Like, I think that made a huge difference." And
Wow.
they were wonderful about it. And, like, you know, they joked around about it and everything, but I was sincere about it, and they know that. And
Mm.
and so I mean, my relationship with them is wonderful. It's awesome,
Yeah.
which thank goodness it is. But and
Yeah.
then the same for Cash and Ruby. And so, you know, Ruby was still pretty young at the time, but Cash remembers. And I same. I've gotten really good if I feel like I've done something wrong, to actually just to get. And that's what I do. I get down on my knees, so I'm at their level, and I apologize to them, and I
Mm.
ask them for their forgiveness. And so, and that's helped. Um, but here's
Yeah.
the best part is that since I have removed myself from the situation, that
Yeah.
and the healing has begun, that side of me, I know it exists. I know it's deep in there.
Yeah.
Everyone says, like, oh, you know, like, are you aware of the darkness within? 100%. I didn't even know it was there before. I know it's in there. I know it's in there. and I
Wow.
know yep, and I know it can be triggered. So I have a whole new level of like a healthy respect for that fact.
Yeah.
But here's the best part is that I have not experienced and felt any of that for since 2019 now. I mean, for, yeah, almost going on. No, I would say, hold on, that's in 2020, late 2020, because
Okay.
I had to make it through the
Gotcha.
divorce first. The clause came out a few times
Yeah.
as we were separating everything, but as it can happen in divorce. Um,
Sure.
but my kids, they have not seen that side of me ever since. They haven't seen it, which is
Dude.
amazing. I'm really happy to say that. So I
Yeah.
haven't spent any time apologizing since. So
That's so
yeah,
good. And you're right that recognizing your own darkness, that's the only way you can choose to preserve, again, the sun on your wrist. Like that's how you show your light, is by knowing that that darkness is possible and exists.
100%, brother.
And
And it's spoken
people
from
look
someone who I think has been through their own difficult times. And
right.
you know
Yeah,
you're going to
just
be in the hot seat next week with me in my podcast. So you're
yeah,
hitting on some
exactly.
really good
Oh
stuff.
boy. Absolutely. Well, it's one of the questions I had was, if you, in telling the story, if it was just kind of a factual retelling, or if it did, or if there was vulnerability along with it. And I can see, it's hearing you tell it, seeing, watching, looking in your face, I can tell you feel it. I mean, this is this. We talk about vulnerability a lot, and how vulnerability is just the awareness that you could get hurt. You expose your underbelly for, giving somebody the opportunity to stab you. So it's, um, the way you're telling it and what you're doing, I can tell it's not just a factual retelling. It really is something that you continue to feel. And it's, I know it requires courage to continue to tell. You've said, if you said, hey, it was embarrassing, I get it. Like it takes a lot of courage to continue to tell this story, because it's powerful, because people can relate it, because even someone listening right now, and in the times you've told it, you're naming it for them. They're like, oh, Chris Powell felt
Sure.
okay. I named, so this is a moment for somebody else to name it for themselves, just like you had the name for you.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate you acknowledging that. Um, and it is, well, so many people, they saw me as like, smiley, hopeful, life coaching
Yeah,
people. And so it's hard to say, okay, there's a side of me then that was really ugly. And I hurt a lot of people,
yeah,
my ex-wife and my kids and everything. So like, and
mm,
you could imagine, like, on social media, especially when people loved the family being together. And so obviously when everything
yeah.
was like coming apart, I mean, people said some pretty hurtful things, and I get
Oh
it.
Lord.
I get it. I mean, and so it's, again, it doesn't look good on me, you know,
Yeah,
but it's the truth. And I figure, if anything, um, anyone else who might be going through that, who just feels, obviously, who's the dark side of them is coming out, and it's hard for them to control, et cetera. It's like, okay, look, there might be some other issues at hand and by the way, there is hope that you can do something about that. So like, it is embarrassing. It's not easy to share, but at the same
yeah,
time, it's real life. And I just wanted to show people, like,
yes,
open the kimono and show you
yeah,
that it's not all hugs and high fives all the time. Hey, if you're struggling, you're not alone in this. Yeah.
yeah. And what's cool is that you're that million on your side. It was a vehicle for a while. You help people through the physical side of things, and certainly some emotional but now this is the mental well-being side. You may need to add another million for the other people you're helping, other people you're
I
helping
would
with
love
that.
that, actually.
Um,
That'd be awesome, man. Maybe one of these
you
days.
should, and maybe heck yeah, on the other side
Yeah.
as well. um, your I can't help but think, and you touched on it some. I can't help but think about your friend who people would look at you now, and they look at, the stuff you're doing now, and they'd be like, oh, Chris is on the other side of it now. No, he's on the other side of it. But I got to think, just like your friend who you put back on a little bit of weight and then you drop it and you put back on some, is there a parallel between that on the mental side of, yeah, I'm still battling through the mental
Oh,
stuff, and it's peaks and
Oh,
valleys.
100%. Well, and you know what I really learned in this process is that, like, just like exercise, you don't do a workout and you're fit for the rest of your life. You're right.
Right.
No, yeah, it's just, no, this is, I woke up, I thought of three things that I was grateful for. I took my cold shower. I walked outside. I got direct sunlight in my eyes. I did 10 minutes of cardio. I have my rituals. and it really
Yeah.
helps set that tone for my day mentally and physically. And so this is, and I am going to, I have to practice these every day, and I want to practice them because they have greatly improved the quality of my life mentally. More than anything, it's
Mm.
mental. And so like
Yeah.
I have to practice that. And I am by, I mean, it's really interesting. I'm just, man, I'm going to shoot you straight here. Um,
Come on, man.
it was a wild run, hosting a show on ABC, and that, and it was like financially, it was amazing. And then for
Yeah.
anyone who's gone through a divorce, you know that you don't lose. It's not just half
Yeah.
goes away.
Right.
Like magically, both sides get, I don't know, where like all of a sudden like 30%, you got like 30%. And so I don't know how the
Right.
math breaks down. I think the attorneys get a lot of it. And all of a sudden, like, dude, I found myself in this place where it's like so much of what had been earned in the past, it's gone. It's gone. And I am
Oh.
climbing my second mountain. And I'm climbing my second
Mm.
mountain. Because, and I bring it up because you do bring up the financial aspect of it. It's like, yeah, man, I'm back in the grind, and I'm rebuilding. I'm
Yeah.
rebuilding on every aspect of, yes, my mental health, but also yes, and yes, my mission in life. This is where Move 1 Million came from. And then I'm rebuilding my other company. And because it's just like, I blew up basically everything that was built, and I'm starting fresh. And so like I'm
Yeah.
I'm in this massive place of where I feel it's almost like before I did Extreme Makeover Weight Loss Edition, where it was like I was working, I was in the trenches. It was when I woke up in California, drove to Arizona, said, I'm going to dig myself out of this. Like that's my mentality
Yeah.
now. And I it was a 2.5 year divorce process where the slate got wiped clean. And now I'm like, I got my shovel in my hand. And when I'm not on
Yeah.
this podcast, I'm in meetings and I'm rebuilding and I'm digging myself out of this thing. And I'm building a
Yeah.
new future for myself and for my kids. And so it's just like my buddy David, he gained the weight, lost the weight, gained the weight, lost the weight. And
Yeah.
it's just like I'm climbing that second mountain now. And there's been peaks and valleys, and it's just this is the roller coaster of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Let me give you a pretty direct word, whether it's inspired or not. And this is this is when you told your story about your health product that it crumbled in your hands and your head was against the pavement. And I just want you to know this about yourself, and you do know about yourself. And this is like very specifically, I just wrote it down, is you know what to do when a dream dies. You know exactly what to do. I just want to make sure you know that about yourself. You just said that, so you already know it, but just to affirm it, like you know exactly what to do. And because you've been there before, because you have the scars from it, and you say like, I know what to do with
Yeah.
this scar. So I want to make sure you know that about yourself. You know exactly
Thank
what
you,
to
brother.
do.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.
If I could like buy shares in Chris Powell right now, I would, because I know you're on the come up. Man, will you talk, you've hit it a couple times. Will you tell people what Move 1 Million is? Will you tell us, you said that was your anchor that's on your side. And will you tell people what that
Yes.
is and maybe even the mission behind
Yeah,
it too?
absolutely. It's a really wild story. So we're about a month and a half into the pandemic, and so part of my healing, I've got there's some buttes out in the East Valley of the Phoenix area, where I live, and I love to climb them, and love to look out at the lights at night. And again, it's just a big part of my own journey of healing. It's kind of
Yeah.
changed my perspective and reconnect with my faith.
Yeah.
And so I was up
Yeah.
there during the pandemic, and I was looking out at all these lights, and I was just in seeing the reports of, all the suffering. People aren't moving anymore. Everyone's stuck in their homes, the mental health issues and the depression, the anxiety, and everyone's sedentary. And I was just thinking, man, like, what could I? And this was actually in the some depths of my darkness. And I had started 3 different companies. Like one was it was for buying and selling real estate. Another one was like a financial consulting company. And like, I mean, it was the funniest thing. I had started them and almost thinking, okay, I'm going to find happiness by building these companies. So I'm going to just go and I'm going to start building all this business, and I'm going to make money. And I was up there on top of this hill looking out at all. what represented about 4.5 million lights of people suffering. And man, it would just came to me. I was like, dude, there's no happiness in trying to build up a bank account. If you want to find happiness, stop thinking about yourself and serve these people that are suffering. And it was like,
Wow.
dude, it hit me. It hit me in the chest. And it was like, go back to your mission. And it just like, it kept coming back to me, like, go back to your mission, go back to your mission. And dude, I came off that hill, literally, like I came off that hill and I felt like I was 10 feet tall. And I was like, I'm back. I'm back. And it was like crystal clear. I'm on my mission. And here's the catch, but I don't know what I'm going to do. I was like, I'm going to help these people. I just don't know how. What do I have? Okay, I was blessed with a platform. So I have a platform. I have my degrees in exercise science with, concentrations in physiology and biomechanics. So I can create some amazing stuff. What can I do? How can I help these people? I sit down on my couch and I turn on the TV and I see this clip it's like a documentary on Japan. And they're talking about how in Japan at 6:30 every morning, the whole country stands up and they do this routine. So I was like, oh, wow, this is freaking cool. Oh my gosh, what is this? So then I jumped onto Google and I Google what's called Raggio Taiso. It's the coolest thing in the world. In 1928, I'm just going to tell you a quick little backstory and it's going to all make sense.
Yeah.
So here we are suffering in the pandemic. Nobody's moving, mental health, social health. I mean, it's just like everything's falling apart. But in 1928, Emperor Hirohito, like on his coronation ceremony, he believed so strongly in physical movement together to unite his country. He mandated 3.5 minutes of movement. It's a total body warm up from top to bottom. It took 3.5 minutes. At 6:30 in the morning, he brought in the radio from the United States and he put it in every school, every factory, every corporation. And at 6:30, the same piano music started. And the whole country memorized a routine of 13 movements. And the whole country stood up and they did it together. And he was trying to, number one, help his people live longer and unite his country. His people were only living to between 40 and 45 years old. That was the average life expectancy in 1928 in Japan. By 1955, this is 1928. By 1955, after doing this every single day, in one generation, Japan became the healthiest country in the world. By 1955, he united his country incredibly powerfully. I mean, to the point where it's like, even in 1945, when the US occupied Japan, we prohibited it because it was so strong in bringing his people together.
Wow.
It united the country because movement together, it's called muscular bonding. It's the reason why soldiers move in lockstep, why dance troops, like why they have such camaraderie. When people move together, it bonds them. If you remember turning on the TV in the pandemic, it was riots in the streets. It was division like we've never seen before. And I'm watching this thinking, we need this now. We need to move. We need to move together. And I just thought, that's my mission. That's what I'm going to do. And it's going to be called Move 1 Million. I want to move 1 million people every single day. So I created the whole routine because this is 1928 when Raggio started, which is called Raggio Taiso, radio calisthenics. And I was like, now they had radio. We have apps. We have web platforms. I just funded the thing myself. It became a service project. So I built a web app. I built a mobile app, created the whole routine, wrote the music, and now it's 2.5 minutes and it's a daily broadcast that's broadcast everywhere. So now we've got 93,000 people moving every day across 71 countries and we're growing. It's super cool. And so actually as we speak right now, I'm building a curriculum for all National Academy of Sports Medicine, so the National Academy of Sports Medicine and the American Council on Exercise for their certified trainers. I'm building a course for them to take a course and Move 1 Million so they can bring it to their communities, because it's about empowering them to help the other people so everyone can feel that service. And so it's growing and growing. That's and it's amazing. Just the coolest thing. And it's 2.5 minutes of movement followed by 2 minutes of mindfulness, because we need that to help bring us here and now, followed by positive affirmations. And it's taken off.
You got 93,001 now.
Awesome.
That's fantastic.
Oh, buddy, you're going to love it. In fact, if you want, I'll send you the course. You can become a certified ambassador. How's that?
Oh, I love it. I'm in. Absolutely. I love that. Do you have a few more minutes? I've already taken up too much of your time.
Brother. Absolutely. In fact, I'm just going to send a quick note. Yep.
Yes, we'll make it. We can edit this.
Yeah.
Let's transition timeout now at
Okay.
54:20.
Okay, we're good.
I gotta hear about I Needed That. And by the way, this podcast is awesome. You and Matthew Blades, if you're a friend of 12 years, tell us about I Needed That. It's already kicked off the beginning of this year, but tell us all about it. It's so good. You're a natural at it. Matthew's a natural at it.
Well,
Let's hear all about it.
thank you. I appreciate it. I brought Matthew in because, we've been buddies for a long time. Shared mission. He just loves to help people. He's been through his own mental health journey, and man, that guy he knows how to run a show, because he's an award-winning radio show host for 27 years, and he's just so good quarterbacking the entire experience. But we both love the long form style podcasts. I think it's awesome because there's just so much, there's a wealth of knowledge that we can extrapolate from 2 to 3 hours. But then we all kept running into the problem of like, who's got 2 to 3 hours? Like, it takes a long time to actually digest and consume that kind of content. So we just thought, like, hey, like, let's do something short form, kind of like taking it back to the old morning radio shows of like the early 2000s, like the Z100s and everything, where it's like just where we wanted to make it fun, but also have those golden nugget takeaways. Cause like I would find myself in a lot of these long form shows just going to the summary at the end, and like just I'll grab the golden nuggets and those takeaways. So it's like, let's consolidate those, but let's just make it fun for people. So bring them in, entertain them. We'll play some games like Hurdle or What Would You Do, or and like you talk about some hot topics. But then in every single show, we'll bring on a specialist and we'll talk about different aspects of mental health, physical health, social health, with the powerful takeaways. But we try to keep it in 15 minutes or so. So it's not, it's not a long, commitment on their end, but at the same time for the listeners, like, man, they get what they need in 15 minutes, but they have a good laugh. I mean, and the name, I Needed That. It came from the concept. It was like every single time we'd finish that, we laughed, we cried, we're like, we'd all sit back and be like, man, I needed that. That was fun. Like, and how many times have you had a good workout or good laugh or good sleep, and you just say, man, I needed that. So that's the concept behind it. It was just give you as much of what you need in 40 minutes as possible.
Yeah. It's great. It's fun, but you also, like you said, there are the nuggets there. They are, and you talk about their solutions and strategies. There's tangible stuff there. And one thing I like that you say a bunch, you say they help people through their suffering. And I like that word because it's an acknowledgement that, we're suffering. Yeah. I've heard people say like, you got to live for the moments that justify life suffering, because that's what we're doing. But what you do is it's acknowledging that, but it's lighthearted as well. But then there is some real depth in those solutions and strategies. What are a couple so far? Just a little, give the listeners a little bit of taste of a couple of the topics that you guys have hit on so far that have been interesting for you.
Oh gosh. Well, like just a really fun one. I'll go back to the one we just recorded 2 days ago. I had one of the individuals from one of the participants from my show from season 5. She came on, and she's actually my vice president. And so I know a lot of people are like, hey, do you still keep in contact with the people from the show? I'm like, well, yeah, every day. So
right. Yeah. So they tell me what to do.
She's been through her own journey, and she struggled with alcohol, and then she struggled with weight gain, and then she's back on and she's losing the weight again, and she's going through her own journey of transformation. So it was fun talking about the experiences on like behind the scenes with the show. So that was a lot of fun, but also talking about the reality of a lot of times when they wrap a show, like very similar to what we did, a lot of people gain the weight back. Some people don't, but a lot of people do. So it was really fun, like diving into that. And it was fun. And it was also it was cathartic for both of us to go back and kind of rehash all of that. We've had some brilliant conversations with some cardiac surgeons, and, just talking about just overall heart health, stress, etc. We've had, our talks about addiction, especially coming from my opioid addiction, but also some folks that came from like Recovery Elevator, which is a really big podcast in the addiction world with alcohol. So Matthew is, gosh, I think he's 12 years sober. Rachel, who's my VP, is 7 years sober. And so, when you listen to the podcast, we're all recovering addicts, all of us, whether it's food, whether it's painkillers, alcohol, you name it. And in fact, I would say half of our guests have been former addicts as well. And we all come from our own journeys. And it's powerful to share because, again,
Yeah.
man, we're not alone in this. No, none of us are alone in
Kidding.
this. Like, we're all struggling with
Man,
something.
that's so
And
true.
you know what? And you said it also, we're all suffering to a certain extent. And a lot of times in our past and sometimes in our current, existence, where we reach for those things to try to numb those emotions. So just, like, I guess the overall theme for the experience is like, yes, you'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll learn, but you're not alone.
Yeah.
For anyone who's suffering, you're not alone in this.
What a great message for people to hear. Everybody go listen to it, subscribe to it. I needed that. I have one more, Chris. I keep trying out ending questions. I have a new ending question that I'm going to ask you. So we'll see how this goes over, but it's easy. It's easy for us as people to, when we see somebody going through something, to say, hey, here's some advice for you. If you were to step outside of yourself for a moment and look and say, what would be the advice for you right now, for Chris Powell right now? What's the advice if you were taking care of yourself? What would you tell yourself? What's the advice you need right now to hear?
It was funny. I actually wrote this down the other day when it came to me, and it's so simple, but I forget it so quickly, and I find myself in this place, and this is the anxiety taking over. I find myself
Yeah.
constantly in a place of panic, creating a sense of urgency around everything that I do. And I wrote down, not on my computer because I had to write it physically, just so I can really get
Yeah.
it ingrained in my mind. I just wrote, be patient. And it's just like, man, I find myself trying to force things to happen so much. And
Yeah.
that would be the one bit of advice I
Mm.
need to give to myself on a regular basis, because that is the anxiety aspect of it, and that's that anxiety
Yeah.
disorder kicking in. It starts ruminating and just thinks it's got to get done now, 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 now. But at the same time, that
Mm.
causes so much stress on me,
Yeah.
and it's also unrealistic. And so I need to remind myself to be patient and allow things to happen as they need to happen. Because I'm trying to control it. I
Yeah.
am a control freak, if
Sure.
you will. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
I got to let that go and just be patient and let
Mm.
things naturally evolve. Yeah.
Yeah. Dude, that's
Yeah.
good.
Thanks.
Chris, thank you for not your time, man, your vulnerability and openness. It's very meaningful to me. It's going to be meaningful to everybody listening. So thank you very, very much for what you're doing, for the path you're on. And yeah, man,
Joey,
thank you.
thank you.